Socrates, but do you imagine that men who are unable to give and take a reason will have the knowledge which we require of them? Glaucon, neither can this be supposed. Socrates, and so, Glaucon, we have at last arrived at the hymn of dialectic. This is that strain which is of the intellect only, but which the faculty of sight will nevertheless be found to imitate. For sight, as you may remember, was imagined by us after a while to behold the real animals and stars, and last of all the sun himself. And so with dialectic. When a person starts on the discovery of the absolute by the light of reason only, and without any assistance of sense, and perseveres until by pure intelligence he arrives at the perception of the absolute good, he at last finds himself at the end of the intellectual world, as in the case of sight at the end of the visible. Glaucon, exactly. Socrates, then this is the progress which you call dialectic? Glaucon, true. Socrates, but the release of the prisoners from chains, and their translation from the shadows to the images and to the light, and the ascent from the underground den to the sun, while in his presence they are vainly trying to look on animals and plants and the light of the sun, but are able to perceive, even with their weak eyes, the images in the water, which are divine, and are the shadows of true existence, not shadows of images cast by a light of fire, which compared with the sun is only an image. This power of elevating the highest principle in the soul to the contemplation of that which is best in existence, with which we may compare the raising of that faculty which is the very light of the body to the sight of that which is brightest in the material and visible world, this power is given, as I was saying, by all that study and pursuit of the arts which has been described. Glaucon, I agree in what you are saying, which may be hard to believe, yet, from another point of view, is harder still to deny. This, however, is not a theme to be treated of in passing only, but will have to be discussed again and again. And so, whether our conclusion be true or false, let us assume all this, and proceed at once from the prelude or preamble to the chief strain, and describe that in like manner. Say then, what is the nature, and what are the divisions of dialectic, and what are the paths which lead thither? For these paths will also lead to our final rest. Socrates, dear Glaucon, you will not be able to follow me here, though I would do my best, and you should behold not an image only, but the absolute truth, according to my notion. Whether what I told you would or would not have been a reality, I cannot venture to say, but you would have seen something like reality. Of that I am confident. Glaucon, doubtless. Socrates, but I must also remind you that the power of dialectic alone can reveal this, and only to one who is a disciple of the previous sciences. Glaucon, of that assertion you may be as confident as of the last. Socrates, and assuredly no one will argue that there is any other method of comprehending by any regular process all true existence, or of ascertaining what each thing is in its own nature, for the arts in general are concerned with the desires or opinions of men, or are cultivated with a view to production and construction, or for the preservation of such productions and constructions. And as to the mathematical sciences, which, as we were saying, have some apprehension of true being, geometry and the like, they only dream about being, but never can they behold the waking reality so long as they leave the hypotheses which they use unexamined, and are unable to give an account of them. For when a man knows not his own first principle, and when the conclusion and intermediate steps are also constructed out of he knows not what, how can he imagine that such a fabric of convention can ever become science? Glaucon, Impossible. Socrates, then dialectic, and dialectic alone, goes directly to the first principle, and is the only science which does away with hypotheses in order to make her ground secure. The eye of the soul, which is literally buried in an outlandish slough, is by her gentle aid lifted upwards, and she uses as handmaids and helpers in the work of conversion the sciences which we have been discussing. Custom terms them sciences, but they ought to have some other name, implying greater clearness than opinion and less clearness than science, and this, in our previous sketch, was called understanding. But why should we dispute about names when we have realities of such importance to consider? Glaucon, why indeed, when any name will do, which expresses the thought of the mind with clearness? Socrates, at any rate, we are satisfied, as before, to have 4 divisions, 2 for intellect and 2 for opinion, and to call the first division science, the second understanding, the third belief, and the fourth perception of shadows, opinion being concerned with becoming, and intellect with being, and so to make a proportion, as being is to becoming, so is pure intellect to opinion, and as intellect is to opinion, so is science to belief, and understanding to the perception of shadows. But let us defer the further correlation and subdivision of the subjects of opinion and of intellect, for it will be a long inquiry, many times longer than this has been. Glaucon, as far as I understand, I agree. Socrates, and do you also agree in describing the dialectician as one who attains a conception of the essence of each thing, and he who does not possess and is therefore unable to impart this conception, in whatever degree he fails, may in that degree also be said to fail in intelligence? Will you admit so much? Glaucon, yes, how can I deny it? Socrates, and you would say the same of the conception of the good, until the person is able to abstract and define rationally the idea of good, and unless he can run the gauntlet of all objections and is ready to disprove them, not by appeals to opinion, but to absolute truth, never faltering at any step of the argument, unless he can do all this, you would say that he knows neither the idea of good nor any other good. He apprehends only a shadow, if anything at all, which is given by opinion and not by science, dreaming and slumbering in this life. Before he is well awake here, he arrives at the world below and has his final quietus. Glaucon, in all that I should most certainly agree with you. Socrates, and surely you would not have the children of your ideal state, whom you are nurturing and educating, if the ideal ever becomes a reality, you would not allow the future rulers to be like posts, having no reason in them, and yet to be set in authority over the highest matters? Glaucon, certainly not. Socrates, then you will make a law that they shall have such an education as will enable them to attain the greatest skill in asking and answering questions? Glaucon, yes, you and I together will make it. Socrates, dialectic, then, as you will agree, is the coping stone of the sciences, and is set over them. No other science can be placed higher. The nature of knowledge can no further go? Glaucon, I agree.